Hi, welcome back to Success Today. I'm your host, Greg Rollett, and right now we have a very special guest, someone who has been helping entrepreneurs and business owners to understand the law, something that they really need to know when they go into business. And the great thing is he is an entrepreneur himself. Please welcome my guest, Larry Pino. Larry, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. Nice to be here, Greg.
I'm really excited for this because there's a lot of lawyers who are out there who are attorneys. They're lawyers, they're litigators, and then there's entrepreneurs. And sometimes they don't speak the same language. And what I love about what you do is you do speak that same language because you've run companies, you've done some great things over the years. So tell us a little bit about how you got into this and how you ride that line of entrepreneur and attorney.
You know, it's really two sides of the same coin. From my standpoint, I started off as an entrepreneur, did several businesses while I was even in college, did a business called Intralex when I was in law school at NYU Law School. So from Notre Dame to NYU, I was doing businesses the entire time that I was actually eventually studying law.
Right, in your free time at NYU.
In my free time, yeah, exactly. But you know, so from my standpoint, whether you're dealing with a subject from the standpoint of law, or you're dealing it from the standpoint of business objectives or entrepreneurial objectives, it's really one and the same thing. And you're right, I mean, there are lots of very fine lawyers, and there are lots of very fine business people, but it's always been an advantage from my standpoint to be able to do both of those and to see an issue or a problem or an opportunity from both perspectives.
Yeah, now there's a lot of folks who, when they want to start a business, they rush into it, kind of ready, fire, aim. And sometimes they don't always set things up properly from the beginning, or they're just growing so quickly that they forget some of these things. What are some of the biggest mistakes you see business owners, entrepreneurs make from the jump?
Yeah, and I think it's a great question because I have so many people come to me and they talk about it from the standpoint of how do I structure my business?
Right.
And structuring a business is important, but it's not the first thing. The first issue is, do I have a market to address and do I have a product to address that market?
Right.
So everything really emanates from that initial conversation. From the standpoint that once you understand that and you do a minor test, some type of proof of concept, to make sure that you've got something that's viable out there, from that standpoint you're off and running. Now, with that said, is it appropriate to be able to structure properly? Absolutely. But you've got to do that second to what you first understand to be the nature of the business.
Yeah. Now, I know there's a lot of folks who they call your office when it's too late, right? They're already in some kind of trouble, something's gone on, maybe there's a lawsuit, things like that.
Sure.
But what are some things they can do to take some precautions, so they don't have to have that phone call, or it makes it better?
Yeah, no, there are two things. So the first thing that we just talked about is making sure that your business is structured properly.
Yeah.
And once you've understand that, and once you've done that initially, then to make sure on an annual basis, just like, you go to the dentist, at least once a year, right? Maybe twice a year,
Maybe twice, yeah.
Right, twice a year. And you go to the doctor at least once to twice a year, right?
Yeah.
To make sure that things are being done properly. We do the same thing for our clients. So we have, for example, one thing we do is called a legal audit. A legal audit, every year we take a look at every aspect of that business. How's your business doing from a financial standpoint? Let's take a look at your products and services. How are they actually identifying in terms of margins versus costs?
Right.
How is that related to the structure of the business that you've got? How about you as an owner of your business? How have you identified, for example, your own estate planning considerations?
Yeah.
Are you properly protected from an asset protection standpoint? And life changes and circumstances change, environment changes. And as a result of that, you've got to make sure that your business is being modified and adapted in the same exact way. So we do that in the nature every single year, right around January, February. We do legal audits for all of our clients, and we provide an actual report that tells them all of those things. That's one way to make sure that you're staying on top of it.
Now, is that probably one of the first things that a business can do when they contact you, is kind of go through that audit process, just see where they're at, right?
Absolutely.
Just like like you said, going to the doctor, getting that checkup.
Well, you know what, and it's interesting again because the perspective is both law and business. And so I had somebody contact me in some state, because my practice is basically nationwide.
Yeah.
And he came to me from the standpoint of making sure that his business was properly structured. And I said, fantastic. Can you do me a favor if you don't mind? Can I see your financials? Show me your financials because I want to be able to see what your products and services are in relationship to how you've structured your business. He sent me those, and the very first aspect of what I went back to was an understanding that he was producing some 90% of his profit, and yet from one particular segment of the business, but most of the expenses were coming from another segment of the business.
Yeah.
And so it became very apparent to him that there was some restructuring that had to be done on the product and service line before we even talk about the entities that are involved. So so with that, when they first talk to me, they usually talk to me about the business in general.
Yeah.
I get an understanding of do they have one entity? Do they have a management entity and an ownership entity? How do they handle their IP? Is their IP being licensed to the holding company, which is really the way it should be?
Right.
And so part of that is understanding the business first, and then once you understand the business, make sure that you understand what the objectives of the entrepreneur or the owner are, and then from there, make sure they've got a structure for the business which is aligned to what they want to achieve.
Now this sounds really unique to me because it almost sounds like you're operating as a business coach, not something that most people would think when they're talking to a business attorney. And
Sure.
some of the things we were chatting before we went live today is the difference between just a business attorney and someone who understands, the business needs of an entrepreneur. So talk about a little bit of
Yeah,
that
it's very
difference
different,
there.
right? So I mean, typically when you have a business, they've got a particular model, and it might be that they've got a franchise. And of course, with a franchise, that's always helpful because
Right.
they've got a business model that has some predicate attached to it, right? But on the other hand, an entrepreneur is fundamentally involved with a creative process of creating products and services that don't exist for a market which may not exist. And so what you're attempting to do is to be able to put those things together in a cogent way and make sure that you have marginalized as much as possible your risk of failure, so that you have excess money available to be able to get to the finish line with that particular creative process, right? An entrepreneur is in a creative mode virtually all the time.
Right.
And even after a startup, that entrepreneur, unlike most established businesses that are out there, and I don't represent the big companies, I represent entrepreneurs. They might be doing 50 million a year, they might be doing 5 million a year, they might be doing 50,000 a year at their start.
Right.
But these are private people. And these are private people who are involved in a creative process of making sure that the business that they're going to create, run, and grow is one that's going to be a very solid business that can take care of themselves and their families. That's a very different mentality than typical businesses which are out there.
Yeah.
The big hospitals of the world, or the
Yeah.
great, those great big things.
Yeah, different needs, different problems, different solutions.
Yeah.
Now, Larry, let me ask you this. What's one piece of advice that you could give to a small business owner and entrepreneur who's watching now that will really help them to succeed in today's economy?
Well, that's an open-ended question.
Definitely.
But I think, really and truthfully, I think having to make sure that you've got the coaching available to you from the very beginning. And that coaching comes from, obviously, people that you trust, number one, and also come from people that not only you trust, but also that have the expertise to give you those things. I mean, the best advice that I might suggest is make sure that you've got somebody giving you advice who has already been there, done that. They've got business in their blood. They understand what that entrepreneurial journey looks like. Making sure that they've got their legal taken care of. And then, of course, making sure that from an accounting standpoint, I have seen so many businesses that do it properly from that standpoint, but get in trouble just simply because the financials and the accounting aren't where they need to be. Our practice, for example, that's you had mentioned, it sounds like business consulting. That's really what we do. We do both legal and business consulting, and we provide that type of internal financial analysis in the process.
I love it. And if there's someone watching right now who wants to leverage some of that business consulting and that legal expertise, what's some ways that they can reach out to you and get this process started?
The law firm itself, and probably the best way to do that, you just call 407-425-7831, a number that I've had for like 30 years, and I'll be very happy to talk to them, and then we'll go from there and determine what their needs are and how we can help.
I love that. 30 years, the number's still going strong, still helping businesses.
It is.
Larry, thanks so much for being here.
Thank you, Greg. Great to talk to you.
Definitely. And we'll be back with more in just a minute from Success Today.